Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sunday School Dropouts podcast. I am so excited for this episode today. Not only do we have some incredible guests, but we also have one Andrew Curbs who is going to be joining us not only for the interview, but also for our flannel graph story time, which will be coming up in just a few moments. So hold on to your seats. We have just a couple announcements before we get into our episode today. If you haven't already, please consider signing up for our Religious Trauma and the Elections course, which is put on through the Center for Trauma Resolution and Recovery. Use the code ELECTIONS to get $15 off. You can sign up for that by going to traumaresolutionandrecovery.com, click the link courses, and it'll shoot you right over to the page. This is an awesome course that runs the entirety of the year during this election cycle. You can join at any time. And since the course is self-led, you get access to all of the course material that's already dropped, as well as when it continues to drop throughout the remainder of the year. So it's definitely something that you're not going to want to miss. New modules drop on the 1st and the 15th of every single month. And we're talking about all sorts of things as it relates to the election cycle. We're not telling you how to vote. We're not telling you who to vote for or where to stand on certain issues. We're simply talking about things like how to have difficult conversations, how to engage in relationships with friends and family members who maybe don't share the same viewpoints as you, how to have embodied boundaries, how to develop a sense of self-trust, use your voice, the history of religion and politics. It is an incredible course. There's amazing guests, and we would love to have you be a part of it. So again, go to traumaresolutionandrecovery.com, click the link courses, use the code ELECTIONS to get $15 off, and join in all the fun that we are having over there. So today we are continuing our topic on purity culture. Our last episode, we talked to Jeremiah and Julia from the Sex Evangelicals about the impact of purity culture on relationships and being a couple inside purity culture, and then moving out of purity culture, but still, kind of some of the impact and the things that you dealt with as a result of that. Maybe you are partnered or married. Maybe you got married inside purity culture, and now you're trying to figure out how to navigate your relationship, or even if your relationship can work outside of the confines of purity culture. I really, really loved what the Sex Evangelicals had to say. And I'm so excited because today we're going to be talking to some individuals who grew up in purity culture, who got married inside purity culture, who left purity culture and really had to navigate through a lot of their own individual healing, a lot of conversations and embodied healing around gender and sexuality and roles and their relationship, and really had to redefine it. And now are better than ever, but also make hilarious content on TikTok and Instagram specifically. You're not going to want to miss this interview. And just like always, we do recognize that sometimes this content can be triggering. And so make sure that you are taking care of yourself, which means if you need to skip over any portion of our episodes, or maybe skip over the episode entirely, never feel bad if you need to do that, and come back if and when you are ready. So before we get into the interview, we're going to have some flannel graph story time, and Andrew is going to be joining us. All right, it has been a minute, but we are back with our favorite flannel graph story time. Just excited to share with you what we're listening to or reading, or some of the things that we're filling our time with. So, Andrew, would you like to share first, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can share first. So yeah, lately one thing I've been doing those past few months, and then also have planned for throughout the rest of this year, is actually going to a bunch of different concerts of bands that I listened to, wasn't fully allowed to listen to, but did anyway. I should clarify.
For
When I
sure.
was in back like in high school, so during my Adventist Academy days.
Yes.
Um And yeah, that's I've been to a couple so far this year with my partner, and it's just been really fun. It's been really cathartic and healing.
Mhm.
Because also just for some additional context, like I was one of those church kids. Like not only did we not go to like secular concerts, I didn't go to Christian concerts. Even contemporary Christian music was
Oh, really?
frowned upon within
Yeah,
conservative Adventism. Yeah.
sure.
So even like, the contemporary Christian scene, I wasn't really into that. I was allowed to listen to that, but I still didn't go to concerts. And so this whole experience of going to concerts at all has just been it's been really cool. It's been really a lot of fun. And so it's one of those things that well, especially if you're talking about parts works and things like that, it's one of those things that these some of these younger parts of myself I have really been absolutely loving doing this. And so yeah, I've got a few more lined up for the rest of this year. And so I've also been trying to catch up on listening to what some of these bands have been up to, like on Spotify for the past 15, 20 years since I was listening to
Mhm.
them regularly. So, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun though.
I love that. So what was your first concert that you ever went to, whether it was Christian or secular?
So, this is a good story. So, first one ever. Well, that was not sort of a Christian kind of concert. I did kind of go to one of those at the tail end of high school, but that was hardly even counts. So this first concert was also the first date that my partner Kate and I ever went on. It was at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, and it was Vance Joy.
Oh, that's awesome. What a great
So
first concert.
yeah,
And at a good place.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like, any artist sounds phenomenal there, and so, you could
Mhm.
have gone to, like, some kindergarten show and you would have been mesmerized. So how old would you have been?
When how old when
Yeah,
how
how
old
old were
when?
you when you went to that concert, did you say?
Oh yeah. Oh, so to that one, I mean, how old am I? I guess that's 35.
Wait,
So
you were
yes,
35 when you went to the first?
yeah, yeah, yep,
Really?
yep.
Okay. So you had never gone anywhere, like, to see music
I
before then?
honestly never had. No. I mean, I listen to music, like,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's not, but as far as going to an actual venue listening to it, I just never had. I'd kind of planned on it last summer going in, but then I just anyway ended up moving and
Yeah.
things were just changing in my life. I ended up not doing that.
Mhm.
Um, but no, I never have. Like the closest thing I ever had was like some little Christian concert thing that happened back in my hometown of like Hendersonville, North Carolina back in 2005, and it was on like a local high school football field.
Yeah.
It was a joke of a
Yeah,
concert,
yeah.
but and it was a Christian concert. So it's like I don't really count that, but I mean technically. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, this that was the first. So yeah, 35.
Wow, okay, that's wild. I would not have guessed that. Just knowing you, like, having,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
music is such an interest of yours that is
Yeah.
so crazy. Oh my goodness. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
I
I
know
will
it's
say
kind of crazy.
I I'm trying to think. I couldn't even tell you when my first concert was. I mean, I was probably or like that I went to. It had to have been well, I was gonna say like 4th grade. I don't really know because like my church had people come in, and there was this band or not band, this a cappella group called the Chancellors. And it was like these 4 older guys who sang a cappella hymns and they were like went on their church tour.
Yeah, yeah.
That was probably my first.
That
But yeah,
well, yeah. Oh, I've
mhm.
definitely Adventism is full of stuff like that. Like there's literally an Adventist uh like a quartet, a cappella
Yeah.
quartet like that's like older men in the church and it's called oh what are they called? The King's Heralds.
Oh
That's what they're called.
gosh.
And it's a thing that as the years go by, different members change, but they've always existed. Like my mom saw them when she was young. I've seen them, but always in church
Wow.
context. Like
Mhm.
I never really counted
I
that as a concert, but I mean, I
yeah.
guess technically, kind of, sort of.
I get where you're coming from. Yeah, absolutely. I I wouldn't really call that a concert. Especially when you consider like the other ones that I've been to. I'm like, those are very different than like
Yeah,
4 guys coming and singing a cappella hymns.
yeah,
So
yeah.
or
But yeah,
barbershop type thing.
it's interesting though because it just well, and for me not having ever gone to a concert. It's just, I mean, it just goes to show not only growing up in the
Hmm.
church, but like and Adventism specifically, where um and also maybe just my family's culture. I don't know. 'Cause my parents aren't really big music listeners, to be honest. My dad might be more so than my mom, but like I really didn't grow up in a world that like really valued music to that extent, or at least if they listened to it, they weren't going out of their way to see artists live or see live music. That wasn't like an appeal to most of the people that I grew up with. Like, and so yeah, I just sort of I think that's kind of just how that happened. But now that I've started going, I'm like, it's one of those things where it's like I'm reclaiming a part of like my life, and also like, what the hell have I like? Why the hell have I not been doing this like decades before ago? Because I could have been doing this for a long time, and
Hmm.
yeah, but waited till I was 35.
You know what? It's going to be a fun thing to make up for lost time for. So that'll be good. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, my thing, this is kind of funny. Have you heard of the show The Traitors?
I am just from the name, I don't think that I am.
Okay.
I feel like I
All
should
right.
know what that is, but I can't say that I do.
Yeah, I'll get back to it. When you were in church, and I'm feeling like the answer is no, since Adventism has even more strict rules around it. But did you, like church or church camp or college even, did you ever play the game Mafia or hear of the game Mafia?
No, I don't. Well, or at
Okay.
least if so, not by that title. Yeah, no.
Okay. So essentially, like the brief overview is that Mafia was this game you'd sit around like in a circle. You had this deck of cards, and there was kind of like three cards that meant something. So if you got, say like the Jack, you were the Mafia. If you got another card, you were a sheriff. If you got an ace, you were an angel. And then everybody else was like townspeople. And so you'd quote unquote go to sleep. And during the middle of the night, the Mafia kills somebody, so, they perk their heads up and they decide who are they going to kill, and then they go back to sleep, and then the sheriff wakes up and points at somebody to like, "Oh, is that person the Mafia?" And the narrator kind of person is like, "Yes or no." And then the angel wakes up and gets to save one person. And then everybody wakes up, we find out who dies, there's this round discussion, and you can like co quote unquote convict somebody of being a mafia, and then you go back to sleep and the whole thing plays over. Okay, anyways, I say all that because we played it all the time, which is funny
Yeah.
because it is a game based on lies. Um, and I was way too good at it, like way too good. But anyways, I tell you that because there is a show on Peacock called The Traitors, and it is Mafia in real life, like Mafia on steroids. It is wonderful. The optics are beautiful. It's in this castle in Scotland, and the castle is almost like Clue like the board game Clue, where you've got like the billiards room and the library and the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's so phenomenal. And they do this. They essentially play the game, and it's for money, and everybody kind of, you don't have a character that you play. You're either a traitor or you're a faithful person. Um, but you dress in certain ways, to kind of like convey this character that you're trying to portray. It is phenomenal. And I just like, there is not much TV where I'm like, I need to watch this the day that it comes out. And that is how it is with The Traitors. It feels so nostalgic, and it's so well done and so fun, and it harkens back to childhood, but it also, I don't know, it's just like, I think that's what it is. It harkens back to a part of my childhood that was like fun. It was fun to play those
Yeah.
games. And now we're like seeing it on TV, and it's, I particularly like the most recent season, season 2. It's all like reality TV kind of quote unquote celebrities, basically like D-list celebrities. But you kind of know them from other shows. I'm a big Survivor watcher, so there's a couple Survivor people on there. There's a Bachelor on there. There's people from Bravo and like all these things. So it's really quite fun. And I found myself just like, I look forward to it every Thursday night. I'm like, "Okay, there's another episode that's coming out."
Now that you say
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
that, like D-list celebrities, and then you mentioned Scotland, I have seen a trailer for it now that I'm thinking about it. And
Yes.
then you said it's on Peacock, so I'm like, okay. Have not watched it, but I know what you're talking about now.
I highly recommend it. I think I'm personally responsible for at least 25 more people watching because it's that good.
I think you should get some
But
kind of
then
kickback for that from
I
Peacock
know,
or
right?
something, you know?
Right. Yeah. But the host, his name is Alan Cummings, he's an actor, is phenomenal. Like he's got his Scottish Baroque and he dresses in very like Scottish clothing. And so he's got kilts and lots of plaids. And it is so fun. It's everybody is in character in this big old castle. And it's great. It's great. I highly recommend it. I'm not one to recommend lots of TV shows because they're mostly reality TV. Um, but I highly recommend. And I think by the time this episode comes out, the season probably will have just gotten done, which is even better. Then you can completely binge it, which is what you're going to want to do anyways. So there is a season one and it's good. Season two is even better. So highly recommend it. That's been something that's been super fun for me.
Yeah, I'll need to check that out now.
Yeah, I love it. The Traders on Peacock. This week, we are joined by Beecher Reuning and April Ajoy, and we are excited. Y'all might know April from her hilarious TikToks and Reels, as she is a content creator who uses humor to shine light on the harmful, toxic, and sometimes just weird traits of American Christianity. She is also the co-host of the Evangelicalish podcast. April's partner, Beecher, is an assistant professor at the University of Kentucky in cinema and television directing and a non-binary filmmaker who used evangelical culture to hide their gender identity for most of their life. April and Beecher host the Non-Binary Marriage podcast, which we will link to in the show notes. So if you would like a deep dive into their relationship, we would encourage you to check out their podcast. When we asked Beecher and April what they would want people to know, they shared that overcoming indoctrination and learning to live honestly and authentically can be really difficult, but is absolutely worth it. So with that, let's welcome April and Beecher to the Sunday School Dropouts.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. This is great.
Yes, I'm so excited. All right, well, let's jump right into it if you don't mind. If you want to just start off and you can go whatever direction you want, share as much information as you want, just kind of a brief overview of your upbringing in religion and purity culture, maybe how y'all got together, got married, kind of the beginning pieces. Whatever you feel like sharing is totally fine.
I don't know how far back you want to go.
As far as you want to.
We are opening up a can of worms here.
Yeah.
So I was raised non-denominational Pentecostal. My dad was a evangelist. So my whole family, like I was homeschooled until middle school. So we would like travel in motorhomes. We'd fly around the world when my dad preached in different churches or stadiums or did conferences, and I'd like sing beforehand. And I remember like the connection to purity culture, like I remember I was like 10 and I was in the car and my dad looked at me and was like, "Hey, April, just so you know, like as you get older, guys only want one thing, and that's to get into your pants." And I don't think I fully understood why they would want to get in my pants. I was like, "What's cool about my pants?" But that really stuck with me because like, oh, they only want one thing, that's to get into my pants. And he was like, and don't let them, was basically the the message. And then, so I had decided pretty early on, because I was a daddy's girl, like I loved my dad. I was very close with him. I was like, well, I'm definitely not letting boys into my pants, and I'm gonna stay a virgin once I started like understanding what that term was. Which I didn't learn about. It's kind of a sidebar. I didn't really learn about sex from my parents. I learned about it from the WWJD chat room when I was a kid.
As one should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate the information was, but some people got freaky in those chat rooms.
I did not know that existed, actually.
It was a thing.
It's amazing what us middle schoolers, when we first got on AIM, able to figure out, because our parents didn't know how the technology worked.
Right. And I'm like, it's a WWJD chat room, Mom. It's Christian.
Oh my gosh, I remember those. Yeah.
It was like
that's where like my age is coming into play. I'm a little older, so I'm like, wait, the children did that? Like, yeah, I didn't have that growing up in high school. So
I would be mortified if like my daughters did what I did. Anyway, that's another story. But so then like I grew up at like the height of purity culture. I was not allowed to date until I was 16. And on my 16th birthday, my parents bought me I Kissed Dating Goodbye by Joshua Harris. But they gave it to me as kind of like a threat almost of like, you need to read this before you date, but we are not going to implement this. We think this is too extreme. But if you don't like behave yourself while you're dating, then we could go to this. Like it could be worse, kind of.
Wow.
was how they gave it to me. So I read it and I was like, this is stupid. My dad also would brag from the pulpit that I was saving myself and that I was a virgin, like from probably like age 12 till I was much older. So yeah, my very first date ever was to see The Passion of the Christ in theaters.
Sexy.
Yeah, it was awful.
Oh my God. That's so strange that you say that because I have that same experience.
Do you really?
I am not even kidding. I was in an Adventist academy, first girlfriend, first date. That's what we saw.
Okay, did you have the same experience where like I was totally into my date and I would be thinking like, cause he would like hold my hand and I'd be like, oh, he's rubbing my hand. Like he's rubbing me with his thumb. And then I would immediately feel guilty as like they slash Jesus again with the whip. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, I'm so sorry. My thoughts put you there, Lord.
Oh my God. I remember mine was, I don't even think we touched hands, honestly. It was very
Yeah, I'm
awkward.
surprised that I did because I felt immediately guilty.
Oh
What
my
were
gosh,
you?
that is
Did you ever
so
read the
strange.
Leslie and Eric Ludy books where they're like, if you even touch somebody, like hold hands with somebody who's not your future partner, you're having an affair because God is all knowing.
Oh
So obviously then God would like know who your future partner is. So therefore you're having an affair. You're cheating on your partner.
Oh my gosh. I definitely knew people that subscribed to that, but I thought even in my very fundamentalist evangelical years, I did not. Oh my gosh, you did?
Oh yes. It's really sad it's very sad, but I have my original copy of that book where I would take notes in the margins of the pages. So I have like wept a couple times as I've gone back and read and I'm like, "Oh, bless her little heart because she was trying so hard." And yeah, that they were just very strict and yeah, you were cheating on your partner or
How did you feel about
yeah.
how did you feel about holding hands like during prayer? Like with people? Like did you ever like somebody and you like had to hold their hand? And then how would you
I
feel about
think there
that?
was like one time, and it's that mixture, right, of excitement similar to what you're describing, April, of like, oh, this is like so great, the tinglies, and then, oh no, I am like this. I shouldn't like this, right? I'm praying, so I shouldn't like that thing. But the first time I did ever hold hands with somebody, I was like a senior in high school, and I felt so guilty afterwards. Now,
Oh.
I should say, Eric and Leslie's book was not out yet. And Josh's book had just come out. Josh Harris's book had just come out. So I was in it, but yeah, then I felt really guilty afterwards when I read that. I was like, oh my gosh, like
Oh
I've
man.
defrauded my marriage because I held hands with somebody. So
Oh,
Oh
that's
my
so
gosh.
yeah, thankfully I was not that that
I'm
into
glad
it.
you weren't either. Yeah.
I mean, what I was in still really messed me up. But yeah. Do you want to give some of your background before I continue? Because I have hogged this conversation.
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. I did not grow up quite as into the evangelical movement as April. I'd say my parents, we went to church kind of on Sundays. It was a non-denominational church. We would go regularly, but not like super overtly, involved. We were Christian. We prayed, but it wasn't like, over April's family was like that was their career, and like it wasn't that. So when I got, and then, so religion was always kind of there. And of course, purity culture isn't really a thing when you're in elementary school. You just kind of like, you don't know about any of that stuff. You don't think about any of that stuff. And then right about the time that I got to kind of fifth and sixth grade, kind of starting that, puberty and all those things, I had an experience where I, put on my sister's clothes and liked the way it felt. And that was my first like, oh, I'm feeling excitement and connection to this. And then it was like panic because I was like, wait a minute, this isn't right. I don't know what's supposed to be happening right now, but this is not right because I've kind of heard about gender. I know about gender. I've kind of heard about this thing called sex, but I don't really know. But I just know that this isn't normal. And so it was kind of a panic moment. And right about that time, my parents' marriage went, they're still married today, but they went to a really rocky place where it like didn't know if they were going to make it. So they were preoccupied. I'm kind of freaking out because I start having gender dysphoria. And so they move.
But you don't know what it is.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, I don't know what gender dysphoria is, which is
Right.
dysphoria is just being uncomfortable with your body and the way it's changing and questioning if you should be another gender. And so right about that time, my parents moved my sister and I to a Christian school. And so my parents were kind of too busy dealing with their own life to give me answers. No one else was giving me answers from the church. And so then I go to, this Christian school and I go to, services every week. And then I'm told that Jesus will fix your confusion and fix your shame and like all this stuff. So I really, really dove in. So I was a Christian before, but in 6th grade, it was like, I'm giving my life to the Lord. Like I am 100% because I am messed up, really messed up. And Jesus, I've been told, will fix me. And so that was like the underlining everything for me going really, really hard into kind of fundamentalism. And so my parents and family was Christian, but I actually kind of middle school and high school pulled them further into it because I was like reading my Bible so much and praying so much and going, Mom, my dad, I want to go to every single youth group thing, everything. And I was like asking them tough questions where they were more like, around kind of like, we would have deep theological conversations that almost I was leading at like 13 and I'm like dragging because once again, that was my lifeline. I was still feeling feelings of gender dysphoria, struggling with things, but every time I'd be like, well, I just need to pray more. I just need to read my Bible more. So I just dove in and did that. And it was that way. And I would say as far as gender, sexuality, what the church told me is that I was a boy and that I should wait till marriage. And that was kind of it. And so I really just clung to like, I'm going to save myself for marriage. I dated a few girls here and there. Never crossed any boundaries because I was like fully committed. I'm going to save myself to marriage because I was really afraid that what was wrong with me was going to come out in my relationship and I wasn't going to be able to function correctly when I got married. So I was like, I'm going to save myself and that's going to be God fixing me one day when I get married.
So you were able to kind of mask your queerness within purity culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I used purity culture as a shield. Because I played baseball and basketball and I was in locker rooms, I was in dugouts where the conversation regularly turned to girls or women or look at this photo. And every time it'd be like, I don't talk about that. I'm a Christian. I don't look at that. I'm a Christian. I've committed myself. I'm not doing. And so really it was me just terrified that, just terrified of my secret. But purity culture gave me this instead of me saying, I can't look at that, picture of a naked woman because I'm actually not going to feel anything. And I'm going to feel a lot of shame because I'm not stimulated in that way. Instead, it was, I don't look at that because I've committed myself to Jesus. So everyone kind of knew me as the perfect Christian boy. And they just didn't come to me with sex or like sexual conversations or sexually forward anything. And so, yeah, purity culture for me, I'm now non-binary. I use they, them pronouns. I dress gender non-conforming and out. But purity culture was the initial way that I tried to kind of fix my dysphoria and fix all that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so,
That's
that was kind of my background. And then we met,
Yeah.
and then of course it was just so easy. We got married.
Well,
good. Yeah. Well, that was my next
Obviously.
question. How'd y'all get together?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
easy story of that. Yeah.
Well, so we met at Pat Robertson's university in grad school.
Wonderful. This is
Yep.
amazing. Yeah.
Yes. I'm a little older than Beecher, so I'd already been there a year. Beecher came in my second year. And we were just friends. I was actually dating someone else when we met. And one night I had broken up with my boyfriend this several months after we had been friends. And there was this Christmas ball. This is going to sound very Hallmarky, but it's our real
I'm
life.
here for it.
We had a Christmas ball at Regent University is the name of the school. And I was on the student government, so I had to run the event, and everyone else was like coupled off or whatever. And I was like, well, Beecher, we should just go. Like, it's like we can go as friends. Like, I'll get you in for free. I'll sneak you in. And I was being like, I hadn't even like thought that I wasn't thinking of Beecher in that way. I just liked hanging out. Like we got along really well. Like we became good friends pretty quickly. I
Yeah,
feel
we
like.
both played, or she played basketball in college. I played basketball in high school. We go and play basketball a lot together. Like
Yeah.
we were good friends.
And so I was like, I'll just sneak you in. And so somehow along this way, we decided that we wanted to just like really impress people with our dance moves. We're not dancers. We've never been dancers, but we were like, we're going to watch YouTube videos and practice leading up to it and just like, wow, everyone. Like we thought it was hilarious. And so one night we went to this abandoned, or it was not abandoned, but it was just an empty classroom because it was after hours. And we're watching YouTube videos. I will say we did do a couple tricks that I didn't think we could do, but we did it.
It's really funny thinking about purity culture, and you wonder, okay, people in purity culture, how do you flirt? And how do you, well, you go to classrooms and you practice ballroom dancing.
Yeah, like the touching that came from just like the dance move. Was kinda like, am I feeling something?
That is so ballroom dancing was
love
how I
that.
kind of figured that out too. Yeah, because I'm like, this is kind of fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
And so
The-
at some point that night, I was just like, gosh, how do people find anyone? Because I had just come on a slew of dating guys that were just annoying me. One of them was on the power team. I don't know if you know what that is, but
you have quite the background.
I-
seriously
I'm-
impressed.
It's insane.
I have a
how
very
many
big-
seats she has,
I'm a
of
very
how
big
deeply she was into your show.
evangelical highlight reel. Yeah, dated on the power team,
Love
sang on
it.
the Jim Baker show, went to Pat Robertson's university. Then I worked for Pat Robertson for the 700 Club.
Can I get your
Oh, wow.
autograph? Because I think it's important.
I feel like it's like the anti-autograph. Like it's an autograph because you feel bad that I did all that. But yeah, so we started going through. I was like, how do people find anyone? Like, no, like there's so many people that are not dateable. And so Beecher's like, well, let's just do the math, and gets out a calculator, and Beecher's like,
That's
well,
awesome.
you want it to be a man? I was like, yes, definitely a man. And so,
Failed there.
and so that took it down half. And then it was like, I want them to be athletic. And we were just estimating, like, well, that's probably like 20% of men. And so then it went down. It's like, they got to be Christian. That took it way down. And I was like, they have to be taller than me. And I'm 6 feet tall. So that took it way down.
Oh, wow.
And then,
wow.
but as we were going through all these categories, I realized that Beecher was checking every single box. And I was like,
well done. Yeah.
But for the record, I had decided about a week ahead of time that I was like, I think I might like April. I kind of want to explore possibly dating. And that is purity culture moves. Ask her to ballroom dance.
Yes.
And then say, well, what kind of guy are you looking for? And then just narrow it down and just
Yeah.
keep going and just keep asking questions until you're the only person left.
Nailed it.
That was so smooth of you. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
yeah. So after that, that was the first moment I was like, that I started being interested in Beecher. And then we did the ballroom dance. We wowed everyone with our dance moves.
And she
And-
looked beautiful that night too. That was
Oh.
kind of the moment I was like, yeah, okay, no, I definitely want to date you.
Mm.
Oh, that's so sweet.
But
I
yeah,
love it.
we kissed that night at like 3 a.m. in the parking lot after I had to go pick up one of my friends who was like drunk with
We
the
don't
Navy
get that.
sailor. Total random story. But yeah, and then that was it. We started dating right after that.
Did you know there was a little Polaroid that was taken of our first dance that night, and I still carry it in my wallet?
I did not.
It's the very first photo of us
That's
That's
together.
so
Sorry.
sweet.
Yeah.
I
I love
love that.
Very romantic.
It really is like Hallmark. Yeah.
I know it
Yeah.
is kind of Hallmark. Minus then in the next few months, I thought Beecher had a demon. 3 demons specifically. You don't really see that in Hallmark movies.
Okay, so yeah, started off very.
Well, hold on, I got to give a little more background.
Wow, I was obviously going to give
I know.
background. We're not just moving on from it.
No, I know. I got to give background for me
Yeah,
first.
We
Before
need a lot of
so,
context.
Yeah. So more purity culture for me, my background real quick. I had signed my purity pledge. I had a purity ring. My
Mhm.
Christian college had another purity week where I signed an additional purity, like I signed multiple purity pledge cards.
Yes.
But I was a horny teenager. And so I was kind of the everything but type of person. Like I definitely would cross some boundaries with some guys, but like never sex, like never intercourse. To me, like that was losing your virginity. Everything else was a gray area, and I was willing to risk it for that. So, so I was a little more sexual than Beecher was, but I was still a virgin. And then I got assaulted one night. Doesn't matter, but I lost my V card.
Doesn't matter.
It does matter.
It does matter.
It
but I
think
feel
definitely matters. Yeah.
it does matter. I think you're just saying you don't necessarily want to go
Like-
into the heaviness of it.
Right. I don't want to go
Yeah.
into the heaviness of it. It happened.
That's totally
Part
That's
of my
fair.
story.
Yeah.
And you have gone into detail before other places. So.
Yes. So that happened. And then after that, I had kind of like, I felt so much shame because purity culture never taught me consent. You know, I'd heard all the illustrations of like, you're a chewed up piece of gum, you're a ripped piece of paper, you're a piece of tape that's lost its stickiness. But they never taught consent in that. It was just once you have sex, that's it. And so I felt really shamed, and dirty and violated. And I was really in a dark place. And so I just kind of made up my mind, which at the time, I think I thought it was just like Satan getting to me that I was giving into, and I just wasn't strong. But looking back, I think it was me like trying to take control of my story. And so I decided, well, whoever I date next, I'm just going to sleep with them, because if I'm going to feel this shame anyway, I might as well be doing something that I'm choosing. And so that's what I did. So the next person I dated for about 2 years, and we did sleep together. And then my dad at the end of that relationship was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, then passed away 4 years later. And I legit thought that God did not heal him of cancer because I had had sex before marriage.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But so I threw myself back into purity culture hardcore and was like, I'd become the secondary virgin that my Christian college had talked about, and wasn't like, I was not going to do anything sexual until marriage again. I just shut that side of me completely down. And so then that's when I met Beecher in that
Gotcha.
era.
And
Your
kind of, yeah.
demon-filled partner.
Yes.
Sorry, keep going.
So we start dating. A month after we start dating, we're actually at Sundance because I was a film student.
Oh,
She was
cool.
a journalism student. And the way Sundance works is back then there was no like app or way to get tickets ahead of time. You went and stood in the freezing cold like 5:30 in the morning, and it opened at 6 a.m. and you went in and you just got tickets. But by the time you got up there, all the good movies or the movies that everyone wanted to see were taken, and so you just got the tickets of whatever you wanted. That was the cheapest way to do it, which of course is what we did. And I don't know if you know about Sundance, but it's very experimental. They've got a lot of really interesting things that go the range. And so
A lot of them are hypersexual.
well, that's what I was going to say. We were these purity culture, I was 23, you were 20, or I was 22, you were probably 24. We were still pretty innocent, and we're going and we're watching all of this really sexually explicit like art house films, because I'm like, I'm a filmmaker, I can handle this. And so then of course, like, I'm really feeling uncomfortable. I mean, it's just this kind of like, I've avoided this topic for so long, and now I'm being like confronted with it, and I don't know how to handle this, but I want to act like I can handle it because I'm a filmmaker. I need to be able to watch this stuff. So then while we were there, April and I actually, we were alone, and I just started bawling like really, really hard. And
it was after though we had done something sexual.
Yes, it was the first. Okay, so I'll say this. It was, yes, we were making out and our hands went to some places that I had sworn that I would not do. And it was the first time in my life that I ever crossed.
Well, and Beecher was the first person that I had felt my sexuality come back alive for since shutting it down. So I was excited. I was like, oh, I'm not broken. Like, this works again.
Yeah, and so
until Beecher responded.
Yeah, our hands crossed some places, and then I was enjoying it. I was very attracted to April, and then I just felt all this guilt and all this shame, and I just start like bawling. And she's like, "What is going on?" And through a lot of tears, I was just like, in 6th grade, I tried on my sister's clothes, and I've had thoughts, and I don't really know what to do with this, and I don't know. And I don't even know. It didn't make sense. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't know how to
remember you
understand
saying you had tried on your sister's clothes and you liked it. And then I said, well, have you done anything since? And Peter's like, oh no. And I was thinking, why is this a big deal? You were in 6th grade. Like, I don't care. Who cares? It's fine.
Yeah. And I remember saying I still have some thoughts, but she's like, but you've never acted on it, right? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, everyone has temptation. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yes,
so,
that's how we do it. Yeah.
And really up until this point too, just to show you how pure I had stayed. Now, and this was not a positive because it did not lead to good mental health at this point. But I mean, I had never looked at pornography. I had never done anything besides kiss. I had never masturbated. I had never, I had not done anything. I had shut that side of me down. And so now I'm with April. I'm far away from my parents. I'm in grad school. Like, I'm feeling like sexually I'm kind of coming alive and really like wanting to be with her, but now I've got all this. I was very confused, very, very,
It was
very
kind of like it
confused.
opened the door for all the things you had shut down for so long, and now everything was
Yeah.
coming up to the
Very,
surface.
very quickly. And yeah, and it was one of those things that over the next kind of in the next month or two, or next 3 or 4 months, I started to my mental health rapidly declined, like pretty significantly. And I looked at it and I'm going, okay, I'm falling in love with April because I told her I loved her, and she's the first person ever said I love you too. I'm falling in love with her. I'm very attracted to her. Why am I having panic attacks? Why am I freaking out? Why am I? And the only thing I could go to when I went to look at the Bible, or what the evangelical church had told me, I should say, was, well, April had slept with someone before and I haven't. I've stayed pure. So the reason this isn't working is because April's messed up. And it's easier because, once again, I can't look at myself. I can't look at myself in the mirror. I'm too scared. It's too difficult. And so instead it's, well, then April's the one that messed up our perfect story. The reason this isn't perfect is because she was the one that didn't. And so it was a really difficult time of like, I knew that Jesus said to forgive and didn't want to do that, but I was just struggling so much, and I was making April feel bad for having, slept with one of her previous boyfriends. And it was a really difficult time. And then eventually, yes, during kind of this season is when it devolved to the point that April's like, or I was like, I think it's a demon. I don't think it's you. I don't think it's your past. I think there's a demon in me or in my head. And so then April's like, absolutely, I bet it is. Let's pray it out. And so then it was like exorcisms.
We had
and
decided it
tongues
was 3 demons.
eventually. But
Yeah.
at first we thought it was just like the reason
Yeah.
isn't working. The reason saying
Well, and
Jesus and
lucky-
laying hands on it isn't working is because there's actually 3 of them.
Yeah, we weren't naming
Yeah.
them. Yeah, no, and
Mm.
lucky for Beecher, I'm a Pentecostal, so I knew how to handle
You
a
can do
demon.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We knew
I
how
know
to
about
handle our
this.
demons.
Yeah. You're a demon wrangler. Just
Yeah.
like whip them up.
Wow. I'm curious,
Wow.
just with some of that, like, was that, were those conclusions that you came to by yourself, or did you like bring in like pastoral counsel, or go to like an elder in the church or anything like that?
So no. So I just moved to Virginia Beach, which is where grad school. So I didn't have a lot of connections. I mean, I didn't know anybody when I'd moved out there 6 months before. And so I didn't have a church that I was really, I mean, I had a church that we were kind of going to, but not enough that I could. And I was so ashamed, like to get into any of it. I was just so ashamed. And I can't see any world that I would have told anybody besides April, which I was felt compelled to tell, where I would have told them about it, unless I knew it was like going to be kept completely private and secret. And like, like it was just too hard. And I didn't know what was going on. So if I had a conversation with a pastor, I'm sure he would have asked me questions, and I don't know what I would have said. And eventually I would say this is probably 3-4 months after I first told April, I hit a really, really low point where I was having some really dark thoughts. And so self-harm, I stopped sleeping. I was crying on and off for multiple days. It was the point that I said, April, I need like really a lot of help. So, through kind of a roundabout way, my landlord, his best friend was a therapist, a Christian therapist. And so I went to see her. And for the time, it was exactly what I needed, which is she knew all the lingo. She really leaned into the Christian aspect of it. Once again, at the time, this is what I needed. And so I told her, I think it's 3 demons. And she's like, yes, it is 3 demons. And so then she like helped me, because she was very Christian, like very like, she was in the same vein, but she spoke the language. If I'd gone to somebody that was more secular, I would have been like, no, you're Satan. You're trying to influence me. I think if she pushed back against my really Christian thoughts, I would have thought that she was a demon and like trying to like throw me off, So I don't look back and like blame her, but I mean, yeah, she was like, here's what you do, and you can, do all. And so I went through this like probably 6 months of like a lot of really hard work of journaling and facing these demons and praying and fasting and all this stuff. And eventually I got to the point where I was at least able to kind of function mentally. And I even told her, I said, I want to get to the point. My goal is to get to the point where I'm healthy enough that I can marry April. I want to marry her. But I don't really want to have to dig too much into the gender stuff, because it was still too scary. It was like, deal with it enough that I can function, but then let's just find a box to put it in and stick it to the side, and then I can just like go on, because that's not really what I'm here for. I'm here for my panic attacks and the fact that I can't get over April being with somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, and so then November. So that was April. I hit the low point. I proposed in November. Our proposal went viral.
We were on Fox
We
News.
were
Really?
we were
gosh.
interviewed on
Oh
Fox
my gosh.
News.
You're going to need to
Um,
send a link of this. I need to see it.
We'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So like in this process, like we would still do, we had boundaries. Like we were like only hand stuff. Like that was our boundary. But even when we would do that, like Beecher would still feel really guilty, like initially on and off. So it kind of had trained me that like anytime we do something sexual, like Beecher gets mad at me. And so that did not bode well for us once we got married. Because I already was messed up from purity culture, but then hearing on the receiving end, you caused this, and just have like being kind of chastised anytime we would do something, like blaming me for anytime we would do something physical was really hard, which for the record, we know why Beecher was doing it, and we've had plenty of conversations about it since then.
Yeah.
But when we got married, which to be fair, we were also very much in love. Like we had a lot of fun together, because when we tell our story, a lot of times we're like, why on earth did we get married? When we say it all out loud, like this sounds like this is a recipe for disaster. Which in some ways it was,
It
but
was both. It was both. I mean,
it was a beautiful disaster.
it was. Yeah. I mean, I'd never felt as strongly as I had. I mean, April was my first time I was really, really in love. Like,
Yeah.
I was just thinking about a way to kind of think about it. And I think that, I had waited all my life to find my wife. I feel like I'd found her. My mental health had devolved. And so I had options. I had to be like, why is this happening? One, I'm too messed up to be fixed and I can't actually ever be married, right? Couldn't deal with that. Two, maybe God doesn't exist, and this whole thing, the pact that I made with him, maybe he doesn't exist. I couldn't deal with that. And then I go, well, must be April's past. And then no, I'm like, no, because the Bible says to forgive and to move on. And so then it was, well, then it must be because we keep breaking boundaries. And I mean, we weren't having sex, we were breaking like the small boundaries we'd set up. And I'm like, and so I really made both. I mean, I would say I felt insanely guilty, and I made April feel really guilty as well every time we'd cross anything besides kissing.
And so the last couple months of our engagement, Beecher was like, let's just go to the courthouse so we can just have sex. And I was like, no, like I want to have an actual wedding night, because I've saved myself again and I'm going to do it right this time. And anyway.
But once again, the reason I was having such a hard time mentally was because we keep crossing boundaries. Well, let's just go to the courthouse, remove these boundaries, and so I can really be happy and healthy.
But I had been to purity services before that were like, even if you've messed up once, which I had, and at the time was what I thought, like God can restore it. Like one pastor was like, God could even restore girls' hymens for their.
Oh, I heard that too.
Yes.
It's wild. I was like, why would I want to go through that again?
Also, just imagine God like, no, we're not going to go over to all these countries and start death. We're gonna perform a miracle.
We'll receive it back.
In Dallas, Texas. Here we go.
That girl, she's been through it. Let's give her a new hymen so she can feel that pain again.
Yeah. Yes, you make a good point.
Yes.
Priorities.
Yeah.
So I don't remember where I was going with this, but we get married. We saved ourselves, and we kind of thought that, well, if we save ourselves, God's going to bless our marriage. And I was just kind of praying and hoping that we would just have amazing sex. Because I was told if you save yourself for marriage, you're going to have amazing sex.
I was told that too, a lot.
Right. And I kind of was like, I told Beecher this. I was like, well, hey, I still have never had an orgasm. So you will still have some firsts coming. Hopefully.
Yes.
Until I dated April, I didn't know what the word orgasm even meant. Like I was so like
and we were so naive. Like I didn't know, like I thought you had an orgasm from intercourse. Like I had never had
just automatic.
Right. The church and all the purity talks, or women's events talked about like a wife pleasing her husband, but I never once heard about female pleasure. That that was even a thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I did not know that women masturbated until I was almost 30 years old. Like in theory, I knew it was physically possible, but I was like, but women don't do that. Like sex is not for us. And so Yeah. Like,
I
why?
did not know about the little button on top. Like when I
Yeah.
imagined women
Yeah, that's
masturbating,
true.
I
Yeah.
didn't think that's what they were doing. I thought they were
Yeah.
doing a lot of effort.
Which it is. It just is. Oh my
So
goodness.
anyway, so we get married and I the sex was
Not great.
it was
Now that we're in a place in our marriage that we have great sex, the sex
it wasn't good. No.
I appreciate the candidness. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was kind of a letdown. But I, again, I just thought, well, it must not be good because I messed up. This is the price that I'm paying because I was not a virgin when we got married. Um, you know, so sex kind of became a chore for me. Like I did it because I felt like that's what a good wife needed to do to like make sure like her husband was fulfilled. And then I also like we try to fit these gender roles that the church placed on us. Like I try to do more domestic duties, like cooking dinner,
Mm.
like a good wife should do, and like do the cleaning and like serve Beecher, like to a degree, because I was still kind of feminist, but
she's always been very confusing on that front.
I've always been feminist, but like my inner feminist nature always clashed with what the church was telling me. And I would go through these things where I try to like shut down like the stronger aspects of my personality to like try to fit that role, but I always felt like weird about it.
You
Yeah.
get mad and you'd be
I
like,
know.
oh, why am I doing this? I don't want to cook. Like it was
know,
like,
I
wait,
would
you're
get
the one
mad.
that said you wanted to. I don't understand. I was confused. I don't feel like I was thrusting as many gender
Oh
roles
yeah,
on
and
you.
then Beecher bought me a dustbuster for our first Christmas as just one of my Christmas
Ooh.
gifts, and I got so pissed. I was
She
like,
so mad.
"Are you
Yeah.
telling me to like stay in the house and
Yep.
clean?"
I was like,
Wrong
no. I was
move.
like, I already bought you 3 gifts. I saw it on sale and thought we could use it. So I was like, guess it's a Christmas gift to us. She's like, but it says to me. I was like, oh
Right.
no.
But I think part of that too was just like knowing Beecher's gender struggle of like
Mhm.
we tried really hard. Like, and I'm not a good cook. Like I
Mm.
accidentally put like the plastic lid on a casserole dish and put it in the oven, like melted it onto the casserole and like didn't know, like over salted the green bean.
I do all the cooking for us now. And I have
Yes.
I have
Okay.
for
Yeah.
probably the past
Beecher's
5
a
or 6
Perfect.
great
years.
cook, but like we felt like at the time, like Beecher can't cook for me. Like that's not the way
Not
this is
regularly.
supposed
I
to
mean, I
do.
did.
And
I
yeah,
did
every once in a
some,
while.
but I think the sex wasn't good, obviously,
Yeah.
at this time. And so I think some reasons why was because for me, having had good sex now, is that it's all about like what I want out of it is a vulnerable connection and like like the emotional vulnerable connection. And I wasn't willing to deal with any of my vulnerabilities. Like, and so I in sex was always keeping that kind of to the side. And then I would be unfulfilled and it wasn't very great. And I still believe masturbating was a sin at this point. And then, so then 2 days later, I was like, well, that last one wasn't good. I guess we need to keep trying. Like, do you want to have sex again? And so I would really like, what about today? What about today? What about today? Not because
Mm.
I was loving it, but because I wasn't loving it. And I was like, I don't know what else to do. We need to like, just like keep going and then we'll get physically
Yeah.
better. When the whole time I realized for me, it was no, I actually, sex for me is a lot more than just physical. Like, that's not
Yeah.
what I get out of it. It's this emotional time of connection.
And I didn't know how to turn off the shame. Like I had been trained that anything sexual brings shame. And so that just never went away. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but in therapy years later, once I started actually working on my issues, realized like I was disassociating every time that
Yeah.
we were having sex.
And as I asked her, and then April, I mean, it was just too much. That's just like that's not the speed she's at. If she would ever say no, then I'd be like, well, the reason we don't have a good sex life because April's saying no and not willing to try things, as opposed to Beecher, you actually have this huge thing you're not dealing with inside yourself, and you can't actually have a good sex life until you deal with it. That was too hard. So instead, it was
Yeah.
it was that. And so that was like we lived in that cycle for a long time.
Yeah. I know this is probably a really almost too broad of a question, but like with just when did you start really recognizing like the issue is like a purity culture, like this entire culture that we were raised in that informed how we view sexuality and relationships and just all of that. I'm just curious when, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't maybe a singular moment, but what was that like?
I think it was over I think it was just a slow realization over years and years of
Mhm.
trying so many different things. Like we would go to, Christian marriage conferences, and they would say like, if you want a good sex life in marriage, you do this, 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 and this. And we would do all of those things, and it didn't do anything. It didn't change anything. They were even like, you could, pray before you're intimate and like help let God bless it. And we tried that, and that was just weird.
Like
Um,
play Christian music. Yeah, we did.
yeah,
We've done
like
that.
make
Oh
it
no,
make
no.
I don't, for the record, thankfully, I don't remember what song, but I know that we definitely.
I know,
And
it's
then
like make it a worship experience.
yeah,
No.
we tried all
I
sorts
w- I mean, like, I've literally heard all of this my whole life, right? Like, this is what you do. And so to hear you being like, no, this is what we did, I'm just
Right.
like, oh, like that hurts my heart and makes me laugh all at the same time. Like,
Yeah. Well,
wow.
and then like
Yeah.
I would hear from some women who would like reference having orgasms and stuff, and I wasn't.
Mm,
Granted, I was very
mhm,
ignorant. I
mhm.
thought you should be able to have it from just intercourse. But I
Yeah.
thought like, well, I'm just broken. I just will never have one, and that's okay. I kind of just
Mhm.
accepted that that's
Yeah.
just not going to happen for me, and that's fine. I don't need it.
And also, even early on, I think you were saying, I've been trained so long to think sex and sexual intimacy is bad. I can't just flip the switch and suddenly make it feel good. I feel
Mhm.
like even early on, when we were very in the church,
Yeah.
April was pointing out that flaw in purity culture. That, like, if
Yeah.
you train yourself to think something's evil and wrong, it's not as easy as, well, great, now we have a marriage certificate and I could just make it great. So even
Right.
before we deconstructed a
And
lot of other stuff, April was very vocal about that.
And I think I remember too hearing that like married sex is always going to be like the best sex of your life, and like unmarried sex is just awful, and like you're going to hate it and it feels dirty and bad. And like having had both, it was just kind of the same. Like it wasn't really, there wasn't a difference between it. I felt shame in both categories. So it was just kind of, at a certain point when the church is telling you things that are not working in your own life, eventually you go, okay, I don't think this is helpful. I don't think this is good. And so, but a lot of this is very intertwined with Beecher's identity.
I was going to ask about that because I that has, I mean, I've worked with couples coming out of purity culture, and there's always like this renegotiation of roles and sexuality and gender and, figuring out how does this look in a new relationship. I mean, that's a big part of your story. So I'm so curious to hear more about that and how that led you to, I mean, now.
Yeah. So we would kind of, we brought in a handful of people along the way, but anytime we would tell anyone, it was always like, like people would just freak out and think it was,
And I should say, while you're talking about just like talking about my gender identity
yeah,
and my struggle with
yeah.
it at the time.
Oh,
So we were married. I was in grad school. If this is right when we got married, I'm in grad school. I have a different schedule in April. She's got a different work schedule. So it's me at the apartment some. And so I've not, once again, tried on clothes at this point. I'm 24 at this point. I've not tried on clothes since sixth grade. But now there was a closet full of clothes, and April's my same height and my same waist size. Right. And I'm trying to get work done, like do work. So it was really difficult. There were days that I would get into her clothes, she'd come home, I'd be crying, I'd explain it all.
Make this big confession.
I always told her because I felt guilty and I felt like I have to tell her. So I didn't, the one of the things where people ask us, like, we traveled so far, how do we make it? We were always honest with each other and open with each other, probably to a fault, probably too much.
Mhm.
But
sure.
so, and even on the days I didn't get into things, I would spend a lot of time like pacing back and forth and praying,
Yeah.
and like
Mm.
why I really want to go try on that dress, but I can't try on that dress because that's a demon and it's back in the closet. And just you get all of
Mm.
this.
Want to open the portal to hell.
And so then
Yes, don't
so
do
at
it.
at a certain point, I remember April coming back as I was really upset because I was like, the demon's back and all this stuff. And April's like, maybe it's not a demon. Maybe it's unhealthy for us to view
Mhm.
it this way because we've done everything possible to try to cast it out of you. And it's not. Maybe this is just like an addiction, like alcohol or like something else. And maybe
Sure.
it's just clothing. And at the time, I was like, okay. And they're like, and so we both like, it's like, we're going to make like hard and fast rules to like make this work. So I couldn't be at the house alone. I couldn't watch
Oh,
any
gosh.
media with
Yeah.
like we just put all these stipulations on my life. We
You
always
did
kept.
too. I didn't just put them on you.
We said we.
Okay.
Said
just
we.
clar-
Yeah, but you were on board with it. It wasn't like
Yeah.
you were like, "There's nothing wrong. Go try
Right, no, I know.
this." Like it was us.
I remember there were times like my friends would complain about their husbands watching porn. And I remember being like, "Ugh, I wish my husband just watched porn instead of wearing my clothes." Like, why can't you have a normal weird thing?
No, I know. I thought that too. Every time I'd ever try to talk to any guys about like their struggle with gender sexuality, it was always pornography, and I was always like,
Yeah.
And they're like, "What about you, Beecher?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I've never looked at anything, and don't really. I think it would kind of gross me out if I looked at it right now. Like I don't know. Like it wasn't a draw. Instead, they all walk by Victoria's Secret looking at the models. I'm walking by Victoria's Secret looking at the lingerie, thinking, "Oh, how would that look like on?" And so it was a totally different
Yeah.
experience. And so we hit a point where we think it's kind of dealt with it as an addiction, more of just like a behavioral addiction that I need to try to deal with. And we were in that camp for a long time.
Well,
I
and
went to a
then-
12-step group to
Yeah.
try to like
And we
Mm.
started
deal with
kind of
it.
like controlled chaos, I guess. Like we'd be like, okay, well, why don't you on this night we can have sex and you can wear like one of my feminine necklaces, or like we started trying to like incorporate it a little bit into like maybe this will take the shame away, and if the shame's gone, maybe you won't feel this like constant urge to like do it. But that didn't make it go away either, but it did get rid of some of the shame, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean it was a slow process, and we had 2 kids during this span of where we thought it was an addiction, and we moved states, and I took a job teaching at a Christian university, and it was a lot, and it was hard, and I just there were good months, bad months over the course of years, and I always told April, was honest with her, but she of course kind of got desensitized to it. She didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to deal with it. Okay, it's all right. Don't do it again.
I was kind
It's
of
okay.
for a while was on team. Just don't ask, don't tell. Like you just do what you need to do. I don't need to see it. I don't need to hear about it, but I'm not gonna like make a big deal of it. You just don't let me see it.
I mean, that was
For a little
probably
while.
6 or 7 years into the marriage. At
Yeah.
a certain point, you hit that.
Because it wouldn't go away, and we
Yeah.
prayed against it. I laid hands on Beecher. We like memorized Bible verses together. We would recite them. We prayed, read our Bible. Like we did all of the things that the church told us on like how to beat whatever this quote unquote sin was. But we couldn't even define what the sin was. At a certain point, we were like, why is this wrong? Why are we fighting this so hard? And we were going through all of this while I was a worship leader at a church. Beecher worked for a church, and then worked at that Christian college. And like, there was no one to talk to. We had never even heard the term gender dysphoria. We were so ignorant on gender issues. We only knew gender roles that the church had taught, where a woman is the wife and she serves the husband. And even though we were still kind of that felt wrong to us, like we always kind of felt like we should be partners.
Mhm.
But even then we were like, well, your thing is not normal from what the church is telling us. So it was just this constant conflict of like what we were experiencing not matching up with what the church was telling us. But we were very strong Christians, and we didn't know how to reconcile the fact that our experience was opposite. And we were also terrified we didn't want to lose our beliefs, because our beliefs kind of were keeping us going in like the darker moments. We're like, will this all be worth it one day? Like we're bearing our cross, more so for Beecher than me, because I was able to kind of separate it from my life a little bit more. But it was just really, it was very lonely and isolating, because I felt like I didn't have anyone to relate to as like someone who has a spouse going through this. And Beecher didn't feel like they had anyone to relate to.
And I try to like tell people that I thought were godly and Christian, and I would try to tell, and then no one ever had anything similar, and they couldn't really help.
Yeah, the few people I would tell, they'd be like, well, maybe it's like demonic oppression. And I'm like, we already tried that.
Went down.
Like we went down that road.
We would get to
Yeah, been there, done that. Yeah.
marriage conferences, and they'd be like, well, we're gonna do questions. We'd like write like detailed questions because we were struggling, and no one ever answered them. They were just like, all right, what questions are we gonna answer?
Like,
Ooh,
no,
wow,
not
this
touching
couple
that.
this couple's a mess. No, we're gonna put that over there. Like the church didn't want to engage. They want to just write it off and
Yeah.
we'll just don't do it.
I would have moments too where I'm like, yeah, I know men shouldn't wear women's clothes, but here I am, like half the time I'm rocking men's sweatpants because I just think they're more comfortable. And I grew up playing basketball. Like I wore boys' JNCOs when I was a kid because I just liked them better. Like, and no one ever said that was wrong for me to do that. So it's kind of like this is a big double standard that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But anyway, I don't know
Yeah.
where do you want to land this plane?
I mean, so I can tell the short of it. And if you have any questions, we can go into more. But the pandemic hits. So this is 2020. And so after years of kind of dealing with the way we were, it's now 2020. We're not able to go to church. I'm not going to my Christian university where everyone sees me as a male professor. I am, we're in the house. We have a small house, 2 kids, 2 daughters that are amazing. But it was just a very confined environment. And it's a lot more of like me spending time looking in the mirror. And I didn't like, I never liked looking in the mirror. There was a season in high school where I had a lot of dysphoria where I would not look in mirrors. Like I got ready in the morning, never look in the mirror. I go to school and they'd be like, actually you have something. I was like, oh, do I? And then I'd look because I just avoided them. And so then the pandemic just stripped everything away of everyone else telling me, oh, you're a man professor and you're the head of the household and you're this and you're that. And instead I had to just be like, who am I? And that was the scariest question. That was the question that I was running from ever since that day that I, in 6th grade, when I tried on my sister's clothes, was I am not going to ask who I am. I'm going to have everyone else tell me who I am. And about June of 2020, it was the time that I hit another really low point, like I had whenever we'd first started dating, and I was crying a lot. I was not eating. I wasn't sleeping. It was bad. And April and I just said to April, I said, I think I can press through and be on this earth a little bit longer, but at a certain point, like I can't. I'm not gonna make it.
Beecher
Like,
looked at me and said, if something doesn't change, I'm not going to live long.
like I was just like, I don't know how many more years I because I could, like, I've done 20 years of, I was 30 at the time, done basically 20 years of it, and the idea of doing another 20 years was just too much to bear. And so I said I need to go to a therapist that actually specializes with people with gender dysphoria, because I'd learned the term by this point. And ideally a Christian, ideally this, ideally that. But I found an amazing therapist during the pandemic. We Zoomed. It gave me the opportunity to, in those Zoom, April gave me the permission and ability that in the Zoom meetings, I could present a little more feminine. So it was nice. I didn't leave my house. It was like this opportunity for me to explore and figure things out with a safe environment. And about 6 months after that, I looked at April and was like, I know I'm non-binary. I feel in between. I feel like God's confirmed it. I feel just so happy that it's like not me trying to fit either of these boxes. I just feel, and so I told April then, and you had a hard time with it. Because I think if you were thinking of like, well, where do we go now? What are the consequences of this?
Right. Because I mean, that was our our livelihood.
It was a
Christian conservative college. So it was just kind of, my mind went to, oh, how are people going to respond? How is our family going to respond? How's our job going to respond?
And there's a piece that you were like, am I going to be attracted to this?
Right. I was nervous about attraction and all this stuff. So during this, Beecher finding out their identity, Beecher was super supportive and was like, you should go to therapy too and try to unlearn a lot of that purity culture stuff so that we could actually, like, let's give us a shot and actually to having like a good sex life and
make our marriage work and figure like I've done all this work for 10 years to figure myself out, and now you to have the opportunity to do the same thing wherever you come to, and then hopefully let's see at the end of it if we can make our marriage still work.
And so I did that. I went to a therapist, and she was, I went there because I was like, I want to have an orgasm before I die. And so we
good
did
goal.
it. And she was like, this is the book you need to buy. It was Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. I only had to read like 4 chapters and it like cured me. I was like, yes.
Her work is so good. It's so good.
Yes. And so my therapist was like, go out and buy a vibrator. Try to figure yourself out first. And Beecher was like, buy all the vibrators, do all the things. And I had learned too that because I had a weird thing about being in the room with Beecher, the shame of being with somebody else was, I couldn't, even with like a vibrator, I couldn't do it. And so I was like, I think I need to do this alone. So Beecher would take the girls out and give me time to like, and it took
That's so
several times
sweet.
because I would
Yeah.
like, I would still have these thoughts like in my head, like even while I was doing it, like this is wrong. But eventually practice, I got over that. And then I had to have an orgasm by myself first, but then I was like, Beecher, I'm not broken. It worked. And was like freaking out. And then, but then that was able to like, we could incorporate that together. And then slowly over time, like our sex life just went from like bleh to really great.
It's really interesting to hear you describe it, because when I finally embraced that I was non-binary and felt that, my main feeling was I'm not broken. And what you just said was when you were able to finally experience that, you finally felt like you weren't broken.
Yeah.
So I think what purity culture and evangelical culture in general kind of did to us is we had this nagging feeling that we were broken because we weren't functioning like everyone said we were supposed to, which held our entire marriage back in every way, especially physically.
Well, and it gave us an excuse to not try to work on the problem, because it was kind of like, well, we're just broken. There's nothing to do to fix this. This is just it's something because we messed up and we just have to accept those consequences. Yeah.
It's the ultimate spiritual bypassing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so Beecher's coming out. Well, I know at like one point that was kind of a big light bulb moment for me is when Beecher was bawling one night.
This is before
Beecher
I
came
hit
out.
before I hit the low point.
Yeah.
Even in
like
in the pandemic.
Yeah, I saw Beecher go to this really dark place, and then they told me, that they had thoughts about harming themselves, and it just kind of clicked. It's like, why am I don't even know what belief is more important than the person that I love. Sitting here like bawling. I was like, it's just clothes, it's just fabric. It's a way of presenting. Like, who cares? And so in this moment when Beecher was like crying, I don't remember what you said. You said something like, I don't know if it's worth like living. And I just like grabbed him and I took them to our closet and I grabbed one of my dresses and I put it on them. And I looked Beecher in the
It's a skirt and
a skirt and a top. Yeah.
Yeah.
I put it on them and I looked them in the eyes and I said, Beecher, I would rather you be alive in a dress than dead in men's clothes. And that was just kind of the moment. I was like, we'll figure it out. And like, we had ups and downs and we took a few steps forward and a few steps back.
And that was a really powerful moment. Of course, I bawled and we cried. We had happy tears, and it was good.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, when you tell this story, and so we actually released a podcast called The Non-Binary Marriage that goes through our whole journey. It's like 8 hours long, and we have a group, kind of a church language, a small group of couples that are in the Patreon, but that are in similar situations as us. And I think when we have couples come in and they're really struggling, they're like, what's the answer? What's the fix? And when we tell our story in a lot of detail, it's a lot of like really great moments followed by really tough weeks where you're like, oh, this is a breakthrough. And then it's a lot of back and forth because it takes so long. It's not like you're like, you know what? I think purity culture is not right. No, it's like, that's purity culture stupid. I think we should. And the next day you're like, no, it's totally.
Well, because your brain can recognize that like, this is not right. But when something's been ingrained in you for decades, like even if your brain is saying this doesn't make sense, your heart's like freak out mode because you've been told like this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And you can't just unlearn that overnight. Like your body keeps the score. So your body's remembering like, no, this is how I'm supposed to react to this.
And so it was a lot of back and forth. The moment I think for me that it felt like, so April thing, you kind of said that moment when you said that to me in the closet was a big moment for you.
Yeah.
For me, it was really this moment of a few months after I came out to April's non-binary. I just basically, because April was saying something at the time. She was like, well, she was kind of like, okay, I know you're non-binary, but do we have to tell anybody? I know you're non-binary, but do you have to present that way? Like, like, can we just like,
right. I didn't know if like,
keep it like,
Beecher
that's
could
enough.
be happy, like being themselves at home, because I knew like, if you come out, that's going to have a ripple effect.
It's a process.
Yeah.
But another thing you were saying, and this is something that you were leaning on a lot, was like, I don't know if I can be attracted to that.
Yeah.
And so then we won't have any sex life, any romantic relationship, because I don't know if I can be attracted to you with feminine anything. And so she was like, I remember she was like, I was struggling. We were in a tough position. And April said, Beecher, I like want to support you. And if we were just roommates, I could totally be supportive and be your biggest fan and like go with you on this journey. But I'm your wife and I'm afraid that we're going to lose that and I just can't do it.
Mm.
And at that point, I remember like praying and thinking a lot and then I came back to April and I said, April, like, I need this. I need to be myself. I need to be authentic.
Mhm.
I want you in my life. I want to be sexually intimate. I'm so attracted to you. I want to be romantically intimate with you. But if you can't do the romantic and sexual part and we have to be roommates in order for me to live authentically, then like I need that. Like I'm gonna
Mhm.
take that deal. And she would be like, but you're putting in the response at that time was you're putting your gender identity in front of our marriage. And I'm like I have to. Like I have to. Like for my whole life I'd been somebody that everyone told me I should be and it didn't work and I have to be myself. And I would say it to April. I was like, and that's one reason I was like, you need to go see a therapist. Like you need to know if you're attracted to me or not. Because one minute you think you can be, one minute you think you can't, one minute you think
Yeah,
you can be
that's hard.
romantic, the next it's this back and forth. And I said, I expressed it repeatedly. It's like I love you, I want to be with you. But I have to be authentic and I have to be real.
Mhm.
And that was when the ball was kind of in April's court. And I remember thinking like she went off to think about it and pray about it. I remember thinking like she could come back and like that could be our marriage. Like it could be over at this point. And I remember April came back
Mhm.
and she was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna start seeing a therapist. I'm gonna figure this out, and I'm gonna do everything I can to make it work. And that was the moment for me that was like, we're gonna make it. It's gonna work because
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
saw April say it's no longer Beecher just your problem as a marriage. This is something we both have to work on and see if we can make work.
Yeah.
And that was a huge breakthrough for me. And
Yeah. That was a wake up call for me too. Cause I was like, I don't want to be in a sexless marriage. Like that's not what I
and I didn't want it
wanted.
either. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A
So,
lot.
yeah, I don't I mean, there's like a whole more, I don't know how,
Sure.
there's a lot more to that story.
But
Yeah. Well, and we'll make sure to like direct people to y'all's podcast too, because I know you do go so much more in depth. And I think it's so good for everybody to hear your story. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I appreciate so much the vulnerability. And I know just from folks that I work with who come to me like as a professional, like I'm working with clients and it's like things that weren't even the reason that they came to me, weren't the initial like a lot of things like a lot of what y'all are dealing with comes up at some point. And so it's like all of that to say you're not alone in that experience. Also to say to folks listening, you're not alone in those experiences.
Mhm.
And I think really that I think the last question that I would ask is just kind of that whole question of like be who you needed, or well, not the question, but the be who you needed when you were younger thing. What would you say to yourselves, like looking back, or what would you say to couples who are still in the midst of that, who are still in the midst of these systems, purity culture, and or maybe who have left, but again, like you said, so much of that's so embodied.
Yeah.
there's kind of three things that come to mind whenever I'm talking to people, especially if they're married and dealing with gender dysphoria or anything like that. Um, I tell them that don't think of don't think too linearly. And what I mean is if a good day happens, don't think it's smooth sailing and it's going to be great from there on out. Whether you're not feeling dysphoria, whether your wife's supportive, whether she's not, like it's not a straight line. There's going to be moments that are really bad, and the moments that I got really low, I would think like um oh my gosh, it was a bad day. April says she's embarrassed and doesn't want me to wear, a dress. That means I'm never going to get to wear a dress and I'm never going to explore anything. And now everything she's ever said that's positive is, you just kind of like worst case scenario. And then on a day when she hugs me and says, I'd rather have you in a dress than dead in men's clothes, I'm like, oh my gosh, finally. Like, and then the next day was not as supportive. And like, I would just say, like, try to just realize that it's going to be good and bad days. There's not a quick fix, at least not in our scenario, not anybody. It's not a quick fix. It takes time to unlearn things and to figure yourself out. And then I would just say the biggest advice that I give to couples that are asking me my opinion, I say, you have to be honest with each other. Like, I think that was something I mentioned earlier that April and I had is yes, it was out of evangelical, probably guilt and shame that I confessed everything immediately right when I did it. But the relationships, often the relationships that I've seen that don't work oftentimes isn't necessarily because of the gender identity aspect. It's because the one spouse says, I don't feel like I can trust the other spouse because they hid X, Y, or Z from me. And it's a trust thing more than and so I would just say, as best as you can, even though it's hard to be vulnerable and real, just even if it offends your partner, I think it's better to be open and honest in about what you're feeling and what you're going through than try to keep things hidden and tell them years later and then feel like you've been hiding stuff from them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would just say, I think it took, just to remember that you're not actually broken. And even on days that you feel broken, like there's always a way to come out of that. Like, and I think learning that like my sexuality is actually a really beautiful part of who I am. And it's not something to be ashamed of. Like if you need like a Christianese way of looking at it, like literally the clitoris has one function and that's pleasure.
Right.
And I eventually was just like, God made that for one function, and that is pleasure. And I would be doing a disservice to God by not using that.
Yes, preach. Yes. I love it. Well, I'm so grateful that y'all have been with us today. It's such a cool conversation. Like I said, I'm going to link your podcast in the show notes so people can go into a deeper dive. I'm just very touched by your story. So if people want to follow you, where can they find you? Where's your work? All those sorts of things. How do they get in touch?
Sure. So you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the places at April Ajoy, Ajoy. It's my middle name.
And then I'm on the social media at Hello Beecher, so Beecher.
The social media.
I also just want to say that because I think in our story it was like we were at that Christian school and we were in church still, like, and I'll end it with this, like it was
We did lose a lot.
We got to a great part in our marriage, but then it was okay. How do we now get to a place where we can function? And we lost a lot. When we lost our church, I lost my job over this. Like there was a lot, and there was a season, a time of okay, now that we found personal happiness, are we going to find professional stability and like friends and like community? And I'll just say now we live in Lexington. I'm a professor at University of Kentucky. I love it. I'm completely out there. Our marriage is great. We have friends. We have, it took time, but it's way easy. So for anybody that's I would just say that's thinking, oh, I'd love to come out, or I'd love to be authentic, or but I'm going to lose so much. Yes, you lose, but then you gain. And for me, it was so much better to have personal happiness and a little bit of instability in my social circles. It was way easier to deal with the instability because I felt grounded. I knew who I was. And so that feeling is worth it. And it takes time, but we came out on the other side and we're really, really happy and doing well now. So
yeah, thank you. And you'll make like hilarious videos, like TikToks and reels. So I mean, power to healing, right?
Yeah, we laugh so we don't cry.
That's 100% true. Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much again. Andrew, is there anything else you have for today?
Nothing to say in addition other than just, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate both of you so much. I've known, I think it was, I'm honestly not remembering entirely how I found you on social media. April, I found you first, but I've appreciated both of you on social media, just your presence and your voices. And so again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this was great.
Okay. And thank you once again to Beecher and April for stopping by and sharing their story. It was such a delight to talk to them. And y'all might notice that Andrew isn't here with me for this portion of the podcast. He had some prayer and fasting that he had to be doing. Just kidding. He had to skip out and had another commitment. But for real, we both really, really enjoyed our conversation with Beecher and April, and it honestly could have gone on for a couple more hours. And I'm super jealous because they actually live super close to Andrew, and they are scheduling a lunch date probably as we speak. So I am grateful for them, for their story, and for their authenticity in sharing it. I just really appreciate how their openness towards each other is really what got them through a lot of really, really difficult stuff, and that they were willing to set aside their theology in favor of relationship. I think that's so powerful because oftentimes in the fundamentalist systems that we grow up in, we are taught that theology and doctrine is more important than people and relationships. And I just think that their story is such a beautiful example of relationships over theology, relationships over doctrine, and how beautiful that can be, and how we get so many rewards from it. And I'm just so incredibly encouraged by that. And it's not without a lot of hardship and questions and confusion and many hours and resources and finances spent in therapy. And yet they are living proof that the time and energy spent in doing those things has really afforded them the gift of this beautiful relationship in partnership, as well as parenting their children and being such an incredible couple for other people around them to both witness and befriend and enjoy. So I just loved being able to connect with them. And I'm so glad that each of you got a chance to hear just a small snippet of their story. And as you heard them reference on the episode, and of course we'll link it in the show notes below, they have their own podcast, and there's several episodes, hours, where they go in depth, in detail about their story. And I would highly encourage anybody to go ahead and listen to that. It's fascinating to just hear the ins and outs. And I would dare to say that most of us have a lot of similarities, and perhaps we have differences in our outcomes. Not everybody has the same story in terms of where we end up with our gender, with our sexuality, with our relationships, with our faith backgrounds. But I think that this process of questioning, of having confusion and uncertainty, of grappling, like, do I choose my partner? Do I choose theology? Of the impact of purity culture and fundamentalism and dogma, like that is so familiar to so many of us. And I think that we can all learn from that, and we can all resonate with that to some degree. And so I just would really encourage people to consider listening to more of April and Beecher's story on their podcast, and make sure to go and follow them on all social media platforms, as I think you'll also really appreciate their humorous content. So with that, we're going to be signing off for today. We'll be back in a couple weeks with a new episode, but until then, be blessed.